Hi, everyone. My name is Kurt Bachman, and welcome back to The Ultimate Dish. Today, I'm speaking with Nisha Vora, a lawyer turned foodie and blogger behind Rainbow Plant Life, a once side hustle turned full-time job. With one visit to her beautiful site, you'll see that her main mission is to help you master vegan cooking at home through flavorful vegan recipes, entertaining cooking videos, and tips for making a vegan lifestyle easy. On top of running a successful blog, Nisha also maintains a flourishing social media presence, garnering over 1 million subscribers on YouTube and 700,000 plus followers on Instagram. But it doesn't stop there. Back in 2019, she published the Vegan Instant Pot Cookbook, featuring healthy, delicious, everyday cooking with more than 90 nutritious recipes. She's currently working on her second cookbook. Nisha's work has been featured across leading publications, including CNN, BuzzFeed, Forbes, Glamour, Women's Health, Elle, Food 52, Refinery 29, and more. Listen as we chat about Nisha's decision to leave her job as a lawyer to pursue her passion and key tips for launching a successful food blog. And there she is. Good morning. I'm completely out of breath.
That was a long intro. Thanks for having me, though.
My goodness. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thanks. How are you?
I'm perfect. If I was any better, I'd be you, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good place to be. I'm very, very happy and very grateful for where I get to be.
Well, you're in San Diego. I'm in Colorado. Typically, the sun shines every day. It's been a little rough, but you've had your weather challenges in San Diego as well, I understand.
We have. I sound like the biggest baby when I talk about how it's not perfect weather here because it's fine. We're fine, but it's not as sunny and warm as it typically is. And so we've been struggling and crying and trying to pick up the pieces of our shattered lives because the weather isn't perfect.
Well, you're spoiled in San Diego. My
We
sister
are.
went to San Diego State University, right? And that's just where she met her husband and the whole bit. And so you've got the sea breeze, the sun, and a lot of great restaurants. In fact, that's a great place to kind of jump into your vegan background. Is it a thriving vegan scene in San Diego?
I would say it's very easy to eat out vegan here. I think most restaurants have at least an option or two that's not just a garden salad or French fries. And so it's very easy. I would say there are a few restaurants I really like that are high quality, but I used to live in New York City, so I'm a bit spoiled on that end in terms of the quality and like the innovation. I think it's perfectly nice. But as someone who's spoiled, it's maybe not like tier one. It's tier two in my opinion.
Hey, Chef Kirk here. Just wanted to take a quick break from the show to chat about you. If you're curious about culinary school and the types of careers it could open up for you, our team at Escoffier created a tool that might help. Just head to escoffier.edu/tool. That's escoffier.edu/TOOL. You can get access to a downloadable career interest survey and answer a few questions to see if you might be geared towards the culinary arts, pastry arts, hospitality, or restaurant operations. Get more clarity on the right culinary path for you. Head to escoffier.edu/tool to take this easy assessment. Now back to the show. I have to ask about your level of trust. My family skews plant-based. Boulder's pretty good with that, at least open to it, lots of options. But I do have friends who are, very cautious when they go out to restaurants of what's really going on behind that door. Are they really, preparing this the way I think they are? Are you pretty comfortable with that?
I've learned to become comfortable just because if I want to live a relatively normal social life where when I go out to eat, it's not always because I think I'm going to have the best meal of my life. It's more because it's an opportunity to see friends or to go on date night. And so I don't want to feel anxious the whole time and feel like, oh, are they really using chicken stock instead of vegetable stock? That kind of ruins the point of going out. And so I always tell the server that I'm vegan and I don't eat any animal products. And usually servers know what that is, especially in 2023. But if there's any sort of hesitancy, I'm like, that means no animal products, no butter, no dairy, no cheese, no yogurt, etc. And so I've had generally positive experiences where servers are very like, okay, let me go double check. Like, I'm pretty sure this is vegan, but let me go double check. And that makes me feel more confident and comfortable. And so, yeah, I just try to be as normal about it as possible, because I think otherwise you feel a lot of anxiety, and that kind of ruins the dining out experience.
No, I love that response too. And it's super, super appropriate. It's the idea of, not living your life being suspicious, right?
Yeah.
Going to have a good time, sharing, breaking bread, so to speak, with your guests, and a feeling of community. So I know that you lived in New York for most of your life, Brooklyn. And
Actually, I grew up in California, but I lived most of my adult life in New York. Yeah.
oh, you did grow up
Yeah,
in
yeah,
California, in
I
the
did.
same area?
No, I grew up in a really small town about 3 hours north of San Diego called Barstow. If
Barstow, that's
anyone
right. Yeah.
has done the LA to Las Vegas route, you have stopped over for
Yes.
gas
Yeah.
and fast food in Barstow. That's pretty much what it has and what it's known for.
So, and we talked about it a little bit before the show started, but ever interested in moving back to the East Coast?
Yeah, maybe. Specifically New York City. I think like New York City is just such a magical place in terms of the culture, the vibrancy, the food culture, the innovation. And so sometimes, yeah, I do miss that lifestyle and that pace of living. And so my partner and I kind of toy with the idea of moving back. My parents and my sister both live in San Diego, so that's the biggest draw for me here. And so we're
Oh,
kind of
okay.
figuring out, like, is there a way to be bi-coastal? Is that like a possible world we can navigate and live in?
This day and age, you can, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I was just at the restaurant show in Chicago over the weekend, and one thing that I really noticed, I'm not sure what the scene's like in San Diego, but I will say this, Boulder's had its challenges with staffing and the restaurant industry in general. But boy, the minute you walk into the city of Chicago, and I'm sure New York's the same way, there is a culture of hospitality that just blankets you. And it was almost a little stunning, like, wow, there are a lot of servers here, and the food's coming out really, really fast. And
Yes, absolutely.
it was nice. It was nice. So when it comes to travel to that point, are you more? I've read some things online. For me, the older I get, the more like I'm comfortable popping into Chicago for a couple of days, but I can't wait to get home. I miss the home cooked meals, the family and all of that. How about you in terms of, do you like to stay around the house, or are you a traveler?
Well, so by nature of my work, I'm mostly at home because I'm always working on something at home, but I do love to travel, and I'm not someone who feels like after a few days I need to get back. So as we like evolve our business, I would love to be able to incorporate more long-term travel into it. Like maybe I spend a few months in Bali and learn like
Well,
how
how about
to.
that?
I
Yeah.
know, right? I went there last year and took a vegan cooking class, so I got to like experience like local Balinese food, and it was amazing. And I would love to be able to do that on a more regular basis. Obviously, the last couple of years, travel abroad has been a little bit harder. But I would love to incorporate more travel into my life. My partner and I actually many years ago did a 6-month backpacking trip, and that really stoked that like love and passion for traveling, and not just like vacation traveling, like traveling and learning new
Immersed. Yeah.
places and immersing
Yeah.
yourself for sure.
I love that. I love that. What I also love is I read as it relates to your cooking philosophy, and kind of want to unpack it a little bit. You said, and I quote, "You're worth it. You deserve to eat really good food that doesn't compromise on flavor. You deserve to eat the best version of your favorite foods." So to me, the best part of all of that is the best version of your favorite food. Has food become, and cooking become, too complicated for some? This sounds like, keeping it simple is the important thing, but this idea of the best version of your favorite foods, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, Yeah, I think especially in the vegan world, you have to recreate some of your favorite foods from childhood, from your culture, whatever it might be. And I think that if you really want, I don't know, a shepherd's pie or a bolognese or mac and cheese, whatever it might be, that like you deserve to make the best version of that. Like, and so maybe that mac and cheese doesn't have 6 different vegetables and they're masquerading as mac and cheese. Maybe it is a truly indulgent mac and cheese that reminds you of those comforting feelings. And so maybe it's not the quote healthiest thing to eat, but maybe you don't eat it all the time. And so that's fine. I think there's a tendency in a lot of vegan spaces to be like, okay, how many vegetables can I shove into this? And like, how can I make this the healthiest dish possible? And I think that if you're already starting with vegetables and legumes and whole grains and things like that, that are so good for you, like, I just don't think it's necessary to try to make it the healthiest version of something because you're not going to enjoy it as much. It's not going to satisfy that same craving that you were looking for when you want a mac and cheese or when you want a bolognese or whatever it is. And so maybe that's not how you eat all the time, but when you are trying to make a specific dish, I think it's worth it to take maybe a couple extra steps or to like lean in a little bit into the comfort zone or lean in into like, maybe it is worth going to get that specialty ingredient that is typically used in this recipe that maybe is a little outside of my comfort zone. And so I think that that's kind of my philosophy, is that if you want to eat a certain recipe, like I think it's worth it to try to make the best version of it possible.
No, I love that. What you mentioned shepherd's pie, and I think that's so interesting. In my case, it's that last meal, right? When they ask you, and it took us a long time to figure this out, but in my home, this idea of long, slow roasted onions and then lentils that are essentially braised in mushroom stock takes the place of the traditional, lamb protein. Then, of course, some, potato puree on top, and then we'll finish it in the oven, bake it. It literally, I mean, we still call it shepherd's pie, but it's really onions, lentils with potatoes.
Yeah, I have a similar recipe on my blog, and it's so good, so comforting.
It's super, super easy. As I was thinking about chatting with you, I dined at a restaurant, and again, I'm not going to call anyone out. I dined at a restaurant back in January, and when I was preparing for this, it brought back this memory. Oh my gosh, there's green beans on the menu in January, and which is fine. But I mean, for me as a chef, and probably for you, it's so much easier to think about beets or leeks or celery root or kale or something that's in season, right?
Yep.
Somewhere. And so it kind of a related question. I'm really curious how you feel about using fresh and seasonal ingredients in terms of this idea of yielding the tastiest food, the best version with the best flavor.
Absolutely. I try to prioritize seasonality as much as I can, especially in recipes where that vegetable or that fruit is kind of an anchor. That is so important. Like if you're making a shepherd's pie where everything's getting cooked down in the oven, maybe it's less important that the carrots are super seasonal, right? Like you're going to have this like really hearty meld of flavors. But if you're making like a broccoli steak, I'm putting steak in air quotes, like you want that to be the best broccoli, right? Like it's going to taste so much better. That's the star of the show. Or if you're making like a tomato salad, like you want to be using late summer heirloom tomatoes if you can, right? That's going to be so much better than like a February, beefsteak tomato salad, like which I wouldn't even bother eating. But yeah, I try to prioritize that as much as possible. I am a little too blessed living in California because we have so many things in season that so many times, like strawberry season here is I think 9 or 10 months, which is wild. So sometimes it's a little tricky to be like, oh, fennel's in season or something. And people are like, no, it's not. And I'm like, okay, it's
in my backyard. Yeah.
I try to prioritize that as much as possible. And in my YouTube videos, we'll often talk about like one of the easiest ways to level up your cooking without doing any extra work is to shop seasonally, because your produce will just taste better, sweeter, fresher. And that alone, without changing any seasoning, without taking any extra steps, will just make your food taste better.
I love that. I'm pulling a lot of TikTok quotes out of here. Level up your cooking. I love that. I was talking to a friend of mine He and his brother have a really cool company called Wicked Healthy.
Yeah.
It's a plant-based, yeah, Chad
Super
and
cool.
Derek. And Chad, I was talking to him at the restaurant show actually, and they were introducing a line of seafood, plant-based seafood. And and I said, why is it that that you go to the grocery store and it's, chickenless fingers, and it's why are we still using, the protein nomenclature, if you will? And I think some of that's changing. It used to be very difficult to find plant-based products. They were kind of down that aisle, and you had to go to Whole Foods, and it was behind, this. Obviously, that trend has changed. But Chad made a really interesting comment, and he's been vegan for a long time. But he said that no one's suggesting, it's personal choice, right? Some people love the flavor of proteins, whatever it is.
Mhm.
And it helps with muscle memory
Yep.
or a comfortable narrative, right? Have you and do you believe that that's changing? Will we 5 years from now, will we just call things what they are?
That's a
This
that's a
these are
that's a good
chickpeas
thought.
and red onions, right?
Yeah, that's a good thought exercise. I hope in the sense that like I love cooking with things like chickpeas and lentils and tofu and tempeh more so than things like TVP or more processed things. And not because I'm like the biggest health freak, but because I think it's like, so exciting to take this like very simple budget friendly whole food and be like, what can I turn you into? I do think it's nice to have the labels as like burger or sausage for people who are plant curious, maybe new to this, know that maybe they should be eating less animal products, either for health reasons or environmental reasons or for animal cruelty reasons, but don't really know what it's like or kind of see it as this like hippy dippy weird thing where you just eat granola and salads. And so I think it's nice to have that familiar language for them to feel more like, oh, it's not that different. But I do think that in the future it would be nice if we didn't have to call everything a label that already exists. I don't think we're quite there yet. I think recently I had someone come do work on my house and I had some leftover chickpea tacos that had like a cilantro pesto and like these spices on them. And I was like, oh, dude, to the guy who was there, I was like, do you want some tacos? Like I have leftover tacos. And he was like, chickpea. I've never had a chickpea. And I was like, never. Like, he was calling it chickpea, which I thought was so cute. And he was like, what is this? This is so good. And so like for folks like that, I think having the familiar labels like makes it a little bit just easier to understand, oh, you're not going to be sacrificing that much. You're going to be able to enjoy the familiar textures and flavors that you do enjoy and that you've grown up with. But I don't think we're quite there yet to be like chickpea link, instead of sausage, like what is a chickpea link? People have no idea what that is.
But the taco, familiar term, he tries it, and Noel and I will be over for those later after the show, by the way. Okay. You said another very interesting comment, plant curious. I love that. It's interesting. A lot has to do with where you are in the country too. I did my undergraduate work at the University of Oregon, otherwise known as Hippieville, right?
Yeah. You probably have lots of access to great
my God.
plant stuff.
It was very, very common, right? It's just sort of the way a whole population of people ate in that part of the country in Eugene, Oregon, right? And it was a super comfortable thing. So some of that is just finding its way across the country. But I think it's important. I want to segue a little bit to talk a lot more about you. I think Nisha, your story is incredibly fascinating. Lots of layers, especially when it comes to career transitions. You became a lawyer. This is so interesting to me, to save the world, is what you've said.
Yes.
But now, in a very almost serendipitous way, you're saving the world through food. Not to put too much pressure on your shoulders,
Yeah.
but I do love that, right? So let's go back a little bit, a little time traveling to your childhood, and let's just start with cooking. When would you say that your love for cooking began? Did your mom inspire you in the kitchen? I know that you cooked a family meal at the early age of 16, which is, incredibly stressful, great accomplishment. But take us back. When did this all start to come
Yeah.
together?
So I grew up with my parents are from India, so they're immigrants from India, and my mom cooked home cooked Indian food probably 6 nights a week. But I was exposed to a lot of other food because after school we would go get fast food, or like we would eat, Lunchables and, just not great food during like for lunch and after school. So I had like a 50% home cooked vegetarian Indian diet and then a 50% like standard American processed diet. And I think by the time I was 14, I was like, I am kind of tired of eating this really junky food, and I kind of want to learn how to cook for myself. In addition to the stuff that my mom makes at home, I was just like looking for something different, more varieties, better nutrition. And so I just started learning how to cook by watching the Food Network. And my dad would like
Oh, wow.
TiVo, DVR, I'm like aging myself, but record those shows with that technology. I'd watch them after school, and I was very, very academic. I always did well in school. I really liked school. And so I really approached learning how to cook in the same mentality. I would take notes. I would pause and be, okay, this is how you do this, or like, this is why you saute the onions this way. And then on the weekends, my mom would maybe go to the mall, and I would be like, drop me off at Barnes and Noble. And I would just like sit in the cookbook section and read cookbooks. And I sort of started to learn kind of foundational things and then started applying them in the kitchen. And that's when I started to just really fall in love with it. And I really fell in love with it as a way to feed my family and my family friends. We would have these, my best friend's family who lived nearby, we would have these feasts, we call them. And it was basically like Thanksgiving, but any time of year. And we would do this a few times a year. And as you mentioned, I cooked my first Thanksgiving meal at 16. And I just started to see the delight and joy in people's eyes as they would eat the dishes I made. And that brought me so much joy. And so that's kind of how I started to fall in love with cooking. And then as I got into school, I didn't have as much time for cooking, but when I did do it, in college and law school, it was that same joy of experiencing other people eat your food and feeling so happy and grateful, and like the camaraderie of eating together, which I really loved.
Again, I'm going to kind of dive into a couple of things you mentioned there. It makes me think a lot. Different people I've met over time, feel really, really good if they limit their drinking, for example, or just completely go away from it. And if they change their diets or they exercise a little bit more, right? They feel good. Even at a young age, when you started to realize, hey, I've got to move away from these kind of prepackaged foods that are so readily available to everyone. Did you feel better? Did you already notice that it manifests itself in a unique way, that you just felt great at 16 because you decided to eat a different way?
I mean, I think you feel pretty good at 15, 16, regardless of what you eat, So I don't know so much about that, but I do know that like it was so fun to start learning this new skill and this new way of like, not fending for myself, but being able to provide like food for myself and being able to provide it for my family and friends, which was really exciting.
So you fell in love with cooking and baking, but you still made the decision to become a lawyer, and not just any lawyer. You went to Harvard Law School, graduated, major accomplishment. I should say, congratulations. That's really, really amazing. But you've mentioned that corporate law was soul crushing, and I'm just curious why you initially chose that path, for your life career.
Sure. Well, as I mentioned earlier, I grew up in an Indian immigrant household, and education was always the anchor in our lives, like the forefront thing. My parents never pressured me, but I loved school. I loved like the academic environment. Like I wanted to go to university. I wanted to go on to graduate school. Like those were things that I valued and really wanted to do. And then when I was in college, I did an internship at a legal services office in Oakland, which I went to school in the Bay Area. And I was basically working with low income immigrant women who were the victims of domestic violence. And we were using the specific legal provision on the books to help them get legal status so they could leave their abusers. And it was this very concrete way I could see, wow, like I'm using the law as this very specific tool to help people who need help the most. And I was like, I really want to do that with my life. I want to use the law to improve people's lives and to make a better, like to make a difference in their lives and to make this world a slightly better place than it is. And so this is obviously a very idealistic 19-year-old speaking. But so I went on to law school. And I loved law school. I loved the academic rigor. I loved the kind of debate environment of like, what are good ways to approach social problems? It was the actual practicing of law that was very depressing. So after law school, I went to work at a corporate law firm on Wall Street, which is never what I wanted to do in the first place, but was a high-paying job to pay some bills in a quick way. And that was soul crushing for many reasons. And after that, I mentioned earlier, my partner and I did a long backpacking trip, kind of try to figure out, who am I? What do I want? What do I want out of life? And then I went back to law in the nonprofit space, which is kind of where I thought I would work in a similar type of work that I had done in college. But it just became very clear to me that the law in the US it's very disillusioning. When I worked at the corporate law firm, I got to see how easy it was for big corporate actors like multinational banks to get away scot-free after they had done illegal things. And then when I worked in the nonprofit space, I was representing low-income tenants, and the only thing they had done wrong was be too poor to pay their rent. And so even though there were laws on the books to protect them, I saw how easy it was to twist those laws to evict them and to basically just two very different worlds where I was like, the law is being used in these very different ways. And it just felt very disillusioning. And so that's when it started to the wheel started to turn, like, maybe this is not the way that I'm supposed to be helping people. Maybe this is not the career for me.
So I'd love to kind of move forward then and use food as a metaphor in many ways of cleansing or food as medicine or, a passionate career. I'm not sure where to go first, though. We can talk about your decision to go vegan, but maybe before that, could you sort of weave in Rainbow Plant Life and how that sort of came to fruition? And even I'm thinking of students who, particularly online students, who make big choices to change their career, right? They've always had a love for cooking. It's scary, they have to jump off that cliff. I'd love for you, if you could, kind of talk a little bit about how difficult that decision was and what did you learn about yourself during that time as well?
So many good questions in there. So as I mentioned, I was feeling like disillusioned and unhappy with the law. And so I knew that I wanted to do something else. And initially I was just like grabbing at things. I was like, maybe gardening is for me. I tried out gardening. I was not good at it, did not enjoy it. I tried out coding. This is when coding boot camps became very popular. Sure, I spent 6 months learning how to do basic coding. And I was like, I don't think my brain is wired this way. And then I was like, eventually I was like, wait, I've always loved cooking. Why don't I just lean into that? And so I started not even as like an attempt to find a new career, but like, maybe this is just a fun, relaxing outlet for me. I started posting photos of food I was cooking on Instagram back in 2016, when Instagram was a very different platform. And it started to kind of take off. People were, I don't know, inspired by what I was making or interested in what I was doing. And I started to grow to the point where I was like, maybe this can be some sort of job. Like maybe I can, channel this budding Instagram account into a job of some sort. And I wasn't necessarily ready to leave law in the sense of like my mental state. I was like, but I've invested so much into this career. This is who I am. This is like, I'm a smart academic person. I'm not a creative person, but I was like, but I also am so miserable. So maybe we just see where this goes and maybe we can find a better, happier career than what we're currently doing. And so I used that as an opportunity to apply to a few food startups in New York City where I lived at the time. And there was a food startup that decided I was either smart enough or ambitious enough or creative enough. And they hired me to do social media, recipe development, food photography, copywriting, like just a lot of different things. And So I started doing that in 2017, in the beginning of 2017, and Rainbow Plant Life was still in its infancy at that point. And I just continued to try to build it on the side, on the weekends, in the mornings before work, and the evenings before work, or evenings after work. And it started to take off and continue to take off until eventually 2.5 years later, I was like, I think it's time to go full time on my business. But those 2.5 years, there was a lot of doubt, self-doubt for sure, about like, did I do the right thing? Like, did I just give up this really prestigious career that I worked so hard to get to, and that my parents worked so hard to like put me in the position to be in? One of the things that really I struggled with was, I had always been like smart, and I could just introduce myself and be like, hi, I'm Nisha, I'm a lawyer. And people would automatically know, oh, she works hard, she's ambitious, she's intelligent. But once I was no longer a lawyer, it was like, hi, I'm Nisha and I work in food. And people would be like, what? Like, what do you do? And I would have trouble explaining what I did, because there were so many random things I did, but also I just wasn't confident in my decision yet. So there was like a few years of just being uncomfortable, like in the back of my mind, knowing I made the right decision. I'm building towards something that's useful and that's going to make me happier and that's going to make a difference. But like, I hadn't seen the results yet. And so there's that uncomfortable period where you're transitioning, where you haven't quote made it. And so you're not sure of yourself. And there's definitely some self-doubt and insecurity there.
Such good advice. And I appreciate your transparency and sharing that. So many of our students are faced with the same sort of, oh my gosh, did I do the right thing? And, am I going to be able to provide for my family? Around Nisha, around this same time, you also moved to be completely vegan. And I'd love if you wouldn't mind sharing any evangelistic thoughts for those who are listening and might be on the fence about completely changing. One of the first things we do with our students who are migrating to a plant-based world is we start with the pantry, right? Really simple. Let's just see what you're used to eating. Let's put it all over here on this table, and then we'll restock, right? So any advice for those who are feeling some hesitation to move in a different direction when it comes to the food they put into their bodies?
Yeah. I think that there's often a framing of going vegan or being vegan is a sacrifice of some kind. There's a restriction of some kind. It's a lot of taking out and not adding back in. And for me, being vegan, cooking vegan has been the most rewarding and most fun part of my experience with food. Like, there's just so many creative things you can do when you don't have to start with a chicken breast or a pork loin. I've forgotten the terminology at this point, but like when you start with, like, let's say a chicken breast, like, you're limited by what you can do with it, how you can safely cook it. And then you usually say, okay, well, now that I have my chicken breast, like, what do I want to add on the side? Or like, how do I want to build my meal around it? But if you start with, let's say, fennel, do you want to roast it? Do you want to shave it thinly and make a salad? Do you want to caramelize it in a cast iron pan? Do you want to like ribbon it? Like, I don't know. There's just like so many things you can do. And then you can think about, oh, there's like 100 different flavors I can pair with fennel. Like, do I like it with walnuts? Do I like it with oranges? Do I, like, I feel like they just have so much more creativity. So in terms of students who are listening, who are actually cooking for a living or seeking to cook for a living, I think it just makes you a much more creative cook. And then just for anyone who's just thinking about what they eat and not so much about like their career in cooking or cooking for a living, I think it's still really exciting. And I personally feel so much more energized. I feel happier. And I feel like every time I eat a meal, I'm just like, this is fun. This is exciting. And once you stop thinking about it, I was like, oh, I can't eat chicken. I can't eat pork. I can't eat cheese. I can't eat yogurt, whatever it is. It's more like, what can you add into your diet to make it more fun and exciting? And I have loved cooking for a long time, as I mentioned, but my diet is so much more interesting and so much more varied and so much more exciting than it was before I became vegan. And I don't say that lightly. Like, I truly do think that I'm so much more creative in the kitchen now.
No, I love it. So positive. I love that. It's the half glass full, right? Coming at it from a very what's possible versus what's missing. Along these these same lines, I think we need like 2 or 3 hours. I have a lot of questions. So we're changing our lifestyle, we're changing our career path, and then you transition into blogging and your first cookbook deal. I'd love to one, I'd love to get a secret on the second cookbook, but how do you do that? How do you transition into landing a cookbook deal, going lawyer, blogging, changing your entire career trajectory, and now a cookbook deal? Not that everyone's going to be able to do this, but I think it's fascinating. How did someone come to you and say, "Hey, let's cook a book, create a cookbook," or did this become a dream along the way?
I'll start by saying I've been obsessed with cookbooks since I started cooking. As I mentioned, I would just like spend hours looking at them. And so I think
Yeah,
in the back of my mind, there was always a dream to write a cookbook, but it kind of happened very fortuitously. I was working at that food startup, still kind of side hustling, and a publisher from Penguin Random House, like they have divisions, like one within a division within there, reached out and was like, "Hey, we really like your vegan instant pot recipes. Have you ever considered writing a cookbook?" And again, like I'm still in that phase of feeling very insecure with a lot of self-doubt about like, what's my worth? What's my value? Am I providing value to others? Like, why am I doing this? And so I was like, "You want me?" Like very much imposter syndrome. Like, "Are you sure, lady? Like, do you know, are we talking about the same person?" But on the other side of the coin, I was like, "Well, yes, of course, I will write this cookbook for you." And I think one of the things that helped with that was that I had developed a small niche in an area that wasn't that saturated at the time. It's probably still isn't that saturated. And so I think that can be very helpful for folks who are looking to enter the blogging world or the YouTube world or the cookbook world, any sort of world that has a lot of people in it already, is to find a niche that's not super saturated, but also find a niche that you're genuinely passionate about. Because if you think like, "Oh, keto vegan is not super saturated, let me try that." Like, unless you're truly passionate about creating recipes that are both low carb and plant-based, which is very hard, by the way, you're going to find that it's not worth all the hard work unless you're truly passionate about it. And so I think leaning into a niche, especially in a world there is a lot of food content out there, and really honing your craft and honing your expertise in that craft can help you stand out.
And simultaneously, your personal social media platforms started growing like crazy and continue to grow. And you established yourself as they say, an influencer. Did you anticipate this kind of growth? Or was it more, "Hey, I really enjoy doing this. I can make a living doing this. This is really fun." What was, I'm going to get into your business psyche here. Did you anticipate the growth? Did you plan for the growth? How do you sustain the growth? Again, trying to help our students understand all the things you've got to think about. Passion's important, but I'll get to some more business questions in a minute. But is this where you wanted it to go, or did that just evolve?
I think it just evolved. When I first started posting again on Instagram, this was a creative outlet because I was a stressed lawyer. I don't think the word influencer existed then. And when I
Yeah.
heard it for the first time, I was like, "What is that?" And someone's like, "You're an influencer." And I'm like, "What does that mean?" So like, this was definitely not something I envisioned. And I think that's okay. I don't think you need to have like a set business plan or a set mindset about like, "Okay, I'm going to reach these benchmarks by such and such date." I think like that can add a lot of stress and can actually prevent you from starting in the first place. If you think about like, "Oh, like look at all these creators who have millions of followers. I'm never going to be there." I think that's like a really damaging way to think about it. I think that if you have a passion for food and in a specific niche, and if you are willing to work hard and you're willing to maintain or create or cultivate a growth mindset, which is a term in psychology, which basically means like, maybe I don't know the answer yet, or maybe I'm not good at this yet, but I can be good at it. I can work towards becoming good at it. I think if you maintain a growth mindset and you're willing to work hard and you're excited and you have the passion, like don't let not knowing what your business will look like stop you from starting. I think a lot of people don't ever start because they're overwhelmed by all of the less sexy stuff that can be very intimidating.
At Escoffier, we have plant-based programs, we have wellness programs, we have a relatively new food entrepreneurship program. I'm curious what your thoughts are on how important it is to have sort of that background, that education in understanding how to run a business. And in fact, do you feel that some of the skills you learned as a lawyer are impactful in running your business the way you do today?
I would have loved to have taken a class that would have helped me become a better business person. So I'm glad that those exist. I'm glad that you have those trainings and those skill sets that you're teaching students, because running a business it's hard. And like most of us don't naturally have the skill set to do it. But again, like for me, what has been helpful is maintaining a growth mindset and okay, I'll figure it out. Or if I can't figure it out or don't want to figure it out, I'll hire someone to figure it out for me. But like having educational background for that stuff would be super helpful. And being a lawyer, yeah, it has helped. I don't think that's like the recommended path if you want to become a food blogger or a content creator in food. Like it's an expensive, circuitous, non-linear path to take. But I did teach me to think really critically and to be very analytical in a way I think that a lot of content creators probably aren't. No offense to them. It's just not a skill that most of us are naturally born with. And so when I plan out YouTube videos, I do bring that like very analytical, critical thinking skill set to the table to be like, okay, is this actually going to make a good video? Like what would make a more compelling introduction? And then when it comes to recipe testing, I think just like my meticulous nature really comes in to make sure that what I produce, what I share is a wow-worthy recipe. I think a lot of times people are disappointed in recipes that they find online or in cookbooks because it just doesn't work as well as they thought they would. And my meticulous, crazy kind of brain is like, no, we're gonna make sure that it works really, really well. And so over time, my readers have come to trust that my recipes do in fact work really well. And I'm not saying law school helped me do that, but it did give me the mindset to be like, okay, we're gonna approach this in a very specific, critical way.
Now, well, really, really good advice. Well said. I think it's safe to say that for you, congratulations, choosing a somewhat unconventional route, leaving a very secure career, really worked out in your favor. So we greatly appreciate you sharing that journey with us. Before I let you go, the toughest question of all, and the name of the podcast is The Ultimate Dish. So in your mind, Nisha, what is the ultimate dish?
Oh, that's so hard. The ultimate dish.
Here's where the law school skills come in.
I know,
thinking
right?
Quick on your feet.
So I'll start by saying when I was traveling, we spent a month in Thailand and we took a few cooking classes there. And what I loved learning there and what I loved about all the food there is just the balance of like the way they bring a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of savoriness, a little bit of spiciness, or sometimes a lot of spiciness, a little bit of tang, a little bit of bitterness to create really harmonious dishes that not only the dishes are harmonious, but like the entire meal is harmonious. So if one dish is on the spicy side, then another dish might be on the cooling side. And so I think the perfect dish to me has all of those elements of balance. I do love Thai food. So I would say maybe like a fresh Thai papaya salad to start, followed by like some sort of spicy Thai noodles, followed by, or in addition to like a green or red curry, probably green is my favorite, which is spicy, but also has the coconut milk to have like the balance from the creaminess and the fat, and followed by Thai mango sticky rice.
Oh my gosh. And you had no prep for that. Can I just tell you, I got chills because you brought back memories of the papaya salad that sustained me through college in Eugene,
Oh,
Oregon. Let me tell you.
amazing.
And you had to be careful because sometimes it was super, super spicy.
Oh, yes.
Oh, my Lord. But Nisha, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Super great advice, passion, balance. And I think we're going to do a good job of leveling up our cooking. Brilliant.
Thanks so much for having me on, Kirk. This is really lovely to chat with you.
Thank you for listening to the Ultimate Dish Podcast, brought to you by Auguste Escoffier School of Culinary Arts. Visit escoffier.edu/podcast, where you'll find any materials mentioned during the podcast, including notes, links, and other resources. You can also browse other episodes and subscribe.